The heart monitor beeped a slow, agonizing rhythm that echoed through the bulletproof nursery of the Rossi estate. Little Leo, heir to a ruthless $2 billion criminal empire, was starving to death. Top pediatricians from Mount Sinai Hospital had failed. Intravenous lines were rejected by his tiny, bruised veins. Lorenzo Rossi, a man who could order a Mafia hit with a flick of his wrist, was completely powerless as his son faded. The baby violently refused every drop of synthetic formula. He was dying. Until a lowly Omega servant, hiding a tragic and painful secret of his own, crossed the threshold in the dead of night and did the unthinkable. The Rossi estate sat like an impenetrable fortress on the cliffs of Long Island, heavily guarded by men carrying suppressed automatic weapons beneath tailored Italian suits. Inside, the mansion was a masterclass in wealth and power, dripping with imported marble and Renaissance art. But to Lorenzo Rossi, the undisputed head of the Rossi syndicate, the mansion felt like a sprawling tomb. 2 months ago, Lorenzo's world had been violently fractured. A car bomb planted by the rival Moretti family had detonated outside a charity gala in Manhattan. Lorenzo survived with a few fractured ribs. His wife Sophia did not. She was 8 months pregnant at the time. The trauma surgeons at New York Presbyterian had managed to deliver baby Leo in the final seconds of Sophia's life, pulling the premature heir from the wreckage of his mother's body. Lorenzo had exacted his revenge, painting the streets of Brooklyn red until the Moretti bloodline was extinguished. But the blood on the streets couldn't save his son. Leo was failing to thrive. At 2 months old, the baby looked like a porcelain doll on the verge of shattering. His skin was translucent, his breathing shallow. For the past 2 weeks, Leo had begun violently rejecting all food, the finest organic formulas, donor breast milk sourced from elite private clinics, specialized intravenous nutrient drips. He purged all of it. His digestive system is shutting down, Mr. Rossi, Dr. Harrison Gallagher, the lead neonatologist, said. The doctor was sweating profusely, dabbing his forehead with a silk handkerchief, standing in the middle of Lorenzo's dark mahogany study surrounded by the Don's heavily armed capos. The doctor knew he was delivering news that could cost him his life. We've run every toxicology screen, every genetic panel. There is no medical explanation for the absolute rejection of nutrients. His body is simply giving up. Lorenzo, standing by the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the Atlantic, crushed the crystal whiskey glass in his hand. The sharp shards tumbled into his palm, but he didn't flinch. Blood dripped onto the Persian rug. You are telling me, Lorenzo said, his voice a low, terrifying rasp, that I can buy half the judges in New York State, but I cannot buy a single ounce of fat for my son's bones? I'm sorry, Don Lorenzo. We have maybe 48 hours before his organs begin to fail completely. Downstairs, completely oblivious to the Mafia politics and the impending tragedy, was Hunter Higgins. Hunter was 24, hollow-eyed, and moving through the mansion's massive corridors like a ghost. He wore the standard black and white uniform of the estate's cleaning staff, scrubbing the baseboards of the East Wing until his knuckles bled. Hunter was an Omega running from his own private hell. 3 weeks ago, his abusive alpha ex-boyfriend, a small-time gambler who owed $50,000 to loan sharks, had shoved him down a flight of stairs during a drunken rage. Hunter had been 38 weeks pregnant. He lost the baby, a little alpha son he had already named Leo, though he'd never told anyone that. The physical pain of his recovering body was nothing compared to the crushing emotional void. But nature was cruel. Despite his baby being gone, Hunter's body didn't know that. His chest was painfully engorged, his Omega biology preparing to lactate for a child who would never cry for it. He bound his chest with tight bandages beneath his servant's uniform, popping black market painkillers just to get through his grueling 12-hour shifts. He had taken this job, hired through a discreet no-questions-asked agency, because the loan sharks his ex had provoked were now hunting him. He needed cash, and the Rossi estate paid in thick envelopes of untraceable $100 bills. Hunter was told 3 rules on his first day: keep his head down, never speak to the armed men, and never, under any circumstances, go near the master's suite or the nursery on the 3rd floor. But grief is a strange compass, and that night the house was unusually quiet. It was 2 in the morning. Hunter was polishing the banister on the 2nd floor landing when he heard it. A cry. It wasn't a normal baby's cry. It was a weak, raspy, pitiful sound, the sound of a tiny creature that had fought its final battle and was whimpering in defeat. Hunter froze. The rag dropped from his hand. Deep within his chest, a primal biological trigger snapped. A wave of warmth flooded through him, his omega instinct screaming, demanding he respond. His chest ached with a sharp, burning pressure, dampening the bandages beneath his shirt. His heart hammered against his ribs. He knew he shouldn't move. He knew there were cameras. He knew the men who guarded this house made people disappear for lesser offenses. But the cry came again, so frail, so desperate. Hunter abandoned his cleaning supplies and began to climb the grand staircase toward the forbidden 3rd floor. The 3rd floor hallway was dimly lit by antique sconces. At the far end stood the heavy oak door of the nursery, slightly ajar. Hunter crept forward, his rubber-soled shoes making no sound against the thick carpet. He expected to see guards, but the hallway was empty. Later, he would learn that Lorenzo had dismissed everyone, unable to bear the sight of strangers watching his son die, wanting the floor completely isolated. Hunter peeked through the crack in the door. The nursery was the size of a standard apartment, equipped with medical monitors that blinked in the gloom. In the center was a massive hand-carved mahogany crib. Next to it, slumped in a plush leather armchair, was the night nurse, Beatrice. The older beta woman was fast asleep, a half-empty bottle of high-end Chardonnay sitting on the side table beside him. Anger flared hot and sudden in Hunter's chest. How could she sleep while a baby was crying? Hunter slipped inside the room. The air was sterile, smelling faintly of rubbing alcohol and expensive baby powder. He approached the crib and looked down. The sight of little Leo broke whatever remained of Hunter's fragile heart. He was so tiny, hooked up to a tangle of tubes that looked monstrous against his pale skin. His little fists were clenched, his face scrunched in a weak, silent sob. He was rooting, turning his little head side to side, opening his mouth in a desperate search for nourishment. "Oh, sweet boy," Hunter whispered, tears immediately spilling over his lashes. "You're so hungry." "I know. I know." Without thinking, driven by a raw, devastating instinct that overwhelmed his fear of the Mafia boss who owned this house, Hunter reached into the crib. He carefully maneuvered around the wires and scooped the fragile baby into his arms. Leo felt weightless, too light. Hunter sat on the edge of the velvet window seat, turning his back to the sleeping nurse. His chest was throbbing with painful pressure. Trembling, he unbuttoned the top of his servant's uniform, pulled aside the restrictive bandages, and guided the baby's face to his bare chest. For a terrifying second, Leo didn't move. He lay limp against Hunter's skin. Then a miracle happened. The scent of natural, warm omega milk, not the sterile, chemically processed donor milk or formula he had been force-fed, hit the baby's senses. Leo's tiny mouth opened. He latched on. Hunter gasped, a sob of relief and physical release escaping his lips as the baby began to suckle. It was weak at first, uncoordinated, but within seconds the rhythm steadied. Suck, swallow, breathe. The sound was the most beautiful music Hunter had ever heard. Tears streamed down his face, falling onto Leo's dark wispy hair as he cradled him, rocking him gently. "That's it, sweetheart," he breathed, entirely lost in the moment. "Drink. I've got you." The rhythmic, steady beep 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 of the heart monitor began to strengthen, the tempo smoothing out as the baby's distress faded into the comfort of an Omega's warmth. "Step away from my son." The voice was cold, quiet, and carried the weight of a loaded gun. Hunter's blood ran to ice. He slowly lifted his head. Standing in the doorway was Lorenzo Rossi. He was still wearing his suit trousers and a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal dark tattoos wrapping around his forearms. In his right hand, leveled perfectly at Hunter's head, was a suppressed Heckler Koch USP pistol. Behind him, two massive bodyguards, Dominic and Rocco, stood with their weapons drawn, their eyes scanning the room. The sleeping nurse, Beatrice, jerked awake, gasping as she saw the Don holding a gun. "Mr. Rossi, I just closed my eyes for a second." "This servant," he snuck in. "Shut up, Beatrice." Lorenzo hissed, never taking his dark, lethal eyes off Hunter. He stepped fully into the room. "I will ask you one time before I put a bullet between your eyes. What are you doing to my son?" Hunter was paralyzed with terror, but he didn't drop the baby. His protective instinct flared, and he curled his body defensively around Leo, shielding him from the weapons. He was hungry, he stammered, tears tracking through the dust on his cheeks. He was crying. Nobody was helping him. Lorenzo stepped closer, the gun unwavering. "He rejects all food. He throws it up. Put him down. Now. Look at him." Hunter sobbed, his voice cracking. He tilted his body just enough for Lorenzo to see. Lorenzo's breath hitched. He froze. Leo wasn't choking. He wasn't gagging or turning blue, as he had with every bottle for the last 2 weeks. The baby's eyes were closed in peaceful bliss, his tiny jaw working rhythmically as he drank deeply. For the first time in his short, tragic life, a faint flush of pink was creeping into his pale cheeks. The heavy silence in the room was broken only by the soft, wet sounds of the baby swallowing. Lorenzo slowly lowered his weapon. His hands, which had strangled men to death without a tremor, were shaking. He looked from his son to the terrified, tear-streaked face of the young Omega. "Rocco," Lorenzo said softly, his voice thick with an emotion he hadn't felt since his wife died. "Get Beatrice out of my sight. If I ever see him in this state again, he goes in the river." "Yes, boss." Rocco grunted, hauling the screaming nurse out of the room by his collar. Lorenzo walked slowly toward Hunter, who pressed himself back against the windowpane, clutching the feeding baby. He stopped just inches away. He looked down at the child, watching the steady rise and fall of Leo's chest. Then his dark eyes snapped up to meet Hunter's. "Who are you?" he demanded softly. Within the hour, Hunter's entire life was laid bare on the massive oak desk in Lorenzo's study. Silas, the syndicate's chief intelligence gatherer and hacker, handed Lorenzo an encrypted tablet. Hunter Higgins. 24. Omega. Clean record. Hired 3 days ago by the contracted cleaning service. Ex-boyfriend is Tommy Vance, a deadbeat alpha who owes 50 grand to the Russian mob in Brighton Beach. The medical records from St. Jude's Medical Center confirm it. He gave birth to a stillborn son exactly 22 days ago. He's biologically primed to nurse. Lorenzo sat in the leather chair, staring at the security footage from the nursery. He watched the replay of Hunter holding his son, the way he instinctively shielded Leo with his own body when the guns were drawn. A civilian. A nobody. Yet he had done what millions of dollars in medical science could not. Pay off his ex's debt to the Russians, Lorenzo commanded without looking up from the screen. Then have Dante pay him a visit. Break both his legs, and tell him if he ever says Hunter's name again, I'll take his hands. Understood. Erase his apartment lease. Have his belongings brought here. He doesn't leave this property. Ever. Back in the nursery, Hunter was utterly bewildered. An hour ago, he was a scrub servant facing eviction and mob violence. Now he was sitting in a velvet rocking chair, wrapped in a plush silk robe that one of the staff had hurriedly brought him. Little Leo was fast asleep against his chest, full and content for the first time in his life. The door opened and Lorenzo walked in. He moved with the quiet, predatory grace of an alpha who owned everything he surveyed. He dismissed the two guards at the door with a nod and closed it behind him. Hunter tensed instinctively, tightening his grip on the sleeping baby. He's asleep, Lorenzo said, his voice stripped of the harsh violence from earlier. He pulled up a chair and sat opposite Hunter. Dr. Gallagher just checked his vitals. His heart rate is normal. His oxygen levels are up. He kept the milk down. He just needed an Omega's touch, Hunter whispered, looking down at the boy. Formula and plastic bottles, sometimes babies who've been through trauma just need the warmth. The skin to skin. The comfort of an Omega's scent. Lorenzo stared at him intensely. You lost a child. Hunter flinched, the fresh wound of his grief torn open. Yes. I am sorry for your loss, Lorenzo said, and to Hunter's surprise, he sounded entirely genuine. A ruthless Mafia don had shadows under his eyes that mirrored Hunter's own. My wife was taken from me. They tried to take my son. I will not allow that to happen. He paused, his alpha scent, dark tobacco, aged whiskey, and something sharp like ozone, filling the space between them. You saved his life tonight. For that, you have my gratitude. And you have my protection. Protection? Hunter asked, his voice trembling. Your debts are cleared. The men looking for you will never bother you again. You no longer clean this house. You are Leo's wet nurse. You will have the suite adjoining this nursery. You will have a salary of $20,000 a week. You want for nothing. Lorenzo leaned forward, his dark eyes boring into Hunter's. But in exchange, you belong to the Rossi family now. You do not leave this estate without my armed escort. You dedicate every breath you have to keeping my son alive. He paused, inhaling deeply. And you will stay close to me. Your scent, it's calming. Leo responds to it. So do I. Hunter felt a flush creep up his neck. The alpha's words sent a shiver down his spine. Do we have a deal? It wasn't a question. It was a mandate. Hunter looked at the sleeping baby. He had nothing left in the world, no family, no home, no baby of his own. This little boy needed him. And in a strange, twisted way, he needed this child just as much to heal his shattered heart. Yes, Hunter whispered. For the next week, Hunter's life transformed. He lived in a sprawling, luxurious suite. He ate meals prepared by a private chef, designed specifically to boost his milk supply. And Leo flourished. Under Hunter's constant care and feeding, the baby gained weight. The bluish tint to his skin turned into a healthy rosy glow. He began to open his dark eyes more frequently, locking onto Hunter's face with intense focus. Lorenzo visited the nursery every evening. The terrifying alpha would sit quietly in the armchair, watching Hunter feed and rock his son. They rarely spoke, but a strange, unspoken bond was forming between the grieving Mafia boss and the broken Omega who had brought life back into his home. Lorenzo found himself drawn to Hunter in ways he hadn't expected. It wasn't just the way Hunter cared for Leo, it was the Omega's scent. Sweet milk, warm honey, and something uniquely Hunter that seemed to suit the restless beast inside Lorenzo's chest. When he was near Hunter, the constant, gnawing ache of his alpha instincts quieted. But Hunter was highly observant. Surviving an abusive relationship had taught him to read the subtle shifts in a room. And something in the Rossi household was deeply wrong. It started with Camilla Romano, Sophia's younger sister. Camilla visited the estate under the guise of an aunt checking on her ailing nephew. She was stunning, dressed in head-to-toe Prada, dripping in diamonds. But when she entered the nursery and saw Leo looking plump and healthy in Hunter's arms, Hunter caught a micro-expression on his face. It wasn't joy. It was pure, unadulterated fury. Camilla quickly masked it with a saccharine smile. "Oh, my sweet nephew. It's a miracle. And you," she looked Hunter up and down with barely concealed disgust, "the hero made. How rustic." Hunter kept his head down, but his instincts screamed. The suspicion turned into terrifying reality 2 nights later. Hunter was in the adjoining kitchen of the nursery suite, preparing a cup of lactation tea. The estate was asleep. The new night nurse, a young beta woman named Sarah, had stepped out to use the restroom. Hunter noticed a row of sealed, specialized glass bottles of the organic formula that Leo had previously been rejecting. Lorenzo had ordered them kept in the medical fridge, just in case Hunter's supply ever failed. Hunter opened the fridge. One of the tamper-evident seals on a brand-new bottle of formula was slightly lifted. Frowning, Hunter pulled the bottle out. He unscrewed the cap and sniffed. Underneath the sweet, milky scent of the formula, there was a faint metallic odor, almost like bitter almonds. Hunter remembered what Dr. Gallagher had said, his digestive system is shutting down. We've run toxicology screens. But what if they were looking for the wrong poisons? What if it was something exotic, untraceable in standard panels? Suddenly, a shadow fell across the kitchen doorway. Hunter spun around. Standing there in the dim light was Beatrice, the former head nurse. Lorenzo had fired him and ordered him thrown out of the house. But he wasn't gone. He was holding a silenced pistol, pointed directly at Hunter's chest. "You should have just kept cleaning the floors, little Omega," Beatrice sneered, pulling back the hammer of the gun. "You're ruining everything." The sterile, humming fluorescent light of the medical fridge illuminated Beatrice's twisted face. Hunter stood perfectly still, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The silenced pistol in the former nurse's hand was steady, a chilling extension of his malice. In Hunter's left hand, he still held the open bottle of tainted organic formula. "You were supposed to be a nobody," Beatrice hissed, stepping further into the kitchen and kicking the door shut behind him. "A tragic little scrub servant who would be gone in a week. Do you know how much money I was promised when that Brett finally gave out? $2 million. A villa in Tuscany. And you little Omega coward, you ruined months of careful dosing." Hunter's mind raced, adrenaline flooding his system. The pieces of the horrific puzzle violently snapped together. "You poisoned him," he whispered, his voice shaking with a mixture of terror and overwhelming maternal rage. "He wasn't sick. His organs weren't failing naturally. You were slowly killing a newborn baby right under his father's roof." "Not me," Beatrice sneered, his eyes gleaming with manic greed. "I just delivered the meals. The formula was pre-spiked. Just a drop a day of something special, imported from a private lab in Zurich. Untraceable. Mimics severe gastrointestinal failure. The doctors at Mount Sinai were completely fooled. Everyone was, until you decided to play savior." "Why?" Hunter demanded, subtly shifting his weight. The counter behind him held the heavy electric kettle he had just used for his tea. It was still piping hot. "Lorenzo will kill you. He will tear you apart. Lorenzo will never know." Beatrice smiled, raising the gun to aim directly between Hunter's eyes. I'm going to shoot you, put the gun in your hand, and tell the Dawn you snapped. Grieving Omega Syndrome. You killed yourself. And sadly, in the struggle, the baby got hurt. A tragedy, really. Beatrice's finger tightened on the trigger. But surviving the brutal physical abuse of his past had taught Hunter one vital lesson: when cornered, you do not freeze. You fight. With a guttural scream, Hunter violently hurled the open bottle of poisoned formula directly at Beatrice's face. The thick, pungent liquid splashed into the woman's eyes. Beatrice shrieked, his finger jerking on the trigger. A muffled hoot echoed through the kitchen, and a bullet shattered the expensive marble backsplash inches from Hunter's ear, raining sharp stone fragments over his shoulders. Before Beatrice could wipe his eyes and fire again, Hunter lunged backward, grabbed the handle of the boiling electric kettle, and swung it with all his might. The heavy base connected with a sickening crack against the side of Beatrice's head, simultaneously dousing the older Beta in scalding water. Beatrice collapsed to the floor, screaming in agony. The gun skittered across the polished hardwood. Hunter didn't hesitate. He threw himself onto the weapon, kicking it under the massive stainless steel island, then bolted for the nursery door. But he didn't need to reach it. The heavy oak door was kicked open with such explosive force that the frame splintered. Lorenzo stood there, a terrifying vision of pure, unleashed violence. He was shirtless, having clearly rushed from his own bed, his torso covered in intricate Sicilian Mafia ink. In his hand was a massive Kimber 1911. Behind him, Dominic and Rocco poured into the room, assault rifles raised. Lorenzo's eyes locked onto Hunter, trembling, covered in marble dust and spilled milk, gasping for breath. Then his lethal gaze dropped to Beatrice, who was writhing and sobbing on the kitchen floor. Secure the perimeter. Lorenzo roared, his voice shaking the crystal chandeliers. Dominic, check my son. The boy is safe, boss. Dominic called out a second later from the nursery. Fast asleep. Lorenzo holstered his weapon and crossed the room in 3 long strides, grabbing Beatrice by the throat and lifting him off the ground as if he weighed nothing. His face was a mask of absolute, chilling fury. You have exactly 5 seconds to explain why you are in my son's suite with a weapon, or I will peel the skin from your bones. He poisoned him. Hunter cried out, his knees finally giving way as he slid down the kitchen cabinets to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. He poisoned the formula. That's why Leo was dying. He wasn't sick. He was being murdered. Lorenzo froze. The temperature in the room seemed to drop below freezing. He slowly turned his head to look at Hunter, processing his words, before turning his dead, hollow eyes back to the gasping nurse in his grip. Is it true? Lorenzo asked. It wasn't a yell. It was a whisper, which was infinitely more terrifying. Beatrice choked, his face turning purple. Lorenzo slammed him against the refrigerator, denting the stainless steel. Who gave the order? Please, he begged, tears streaming down his scalded face. She'll kill my family. She promised me. I don't care about your family. Lorenzo's thumb pressed into his windpipe. Give me a name, Beatrice, or you won't live to see the sun rise over the Atlantic. Camilla. Beatrice shrieked, thrashing in his grip. It was Camilla Romano. Your sister-in-law. Silence fell over the kitchen, broken only by Hunter's ragged breathing. Lorenzo closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, the ultimate betrayal registering on his hardened features. Sophia's own sister. The woman who had stood crying at the funeral. Lorenzo dropped Beatrice. He crumpled to the floor, gasping for air. Rocco, Lorenzo commanded, his voice devoid of all human emotion. Take him to the soundproof basement. Call the cleanup crew. I want every single bottle, every drop of formula in this house, boxed up as evidence for Silas. Nobody sleeps tonight. Yes, Don Lorenzo. As the guards dragged the sobbing nurse away, Lorenzo turned his attention back to Hunter. The Mafia kingpin knelt on the floor beside him. He reached out with his large, calloused hands, gently brushing the marble dust from Hunter's hair. He noticed a slight cut on his cheek where a stone fragment had grazed him. You fought him, Lorenzo murmured, his dark eyes tracing Hunter's face with a mixture of awe and profound respect. His alpha scent, tobacco, whiskey, and ozone, was thick in the air, tinged with something deeper. Protective. Possessive. He was going to hurt Leo, Hunter whispered fiercely, wrapping his arms around his own chest. I couldn't let him. I won't let anyone hurt him. Lorenzo's expression softened, a crack forming in the impenetrable armor he wore for the world. He reached forward, and to Hunter's shock, pulled him into his chest. He held him tightly, burying his face in Hunter's hair. The Omega smelled of milk, honey, and gunpowder. You saved him again, Lorenzo swore into the darkness of the kitchen. I vow on my life, Hunter. You will never have to fight for your life in my house again. Hunter felt the alpha's breath against his neck, and a shiver ran down his spine. Lorenzo's scent was overwhelming, dark and intoxicating. Hunter's Omega instincts purred in response, a deep, primal part of him recognizing safety and strength. By 6 in the morning, the Rossi estate was empty. Lorenzo wasn't taking any chances. If Camilla Romano had infiltrated his inner circle once, she could do it again. The sprawling Long Island mansion was a fortress, but a compromised one. Under the cover of darkness, in a convoy of armored black Cadillac Escalades, Lorenzo moved his most precious assets to a location known only to 3 people in the world. It was a $40 million off-the-books penthouse in the heart of Tribeca, occupying the entire top floor of a high-rise. It featured biometric locks, bulletproof floor-to-ceiling windows, a private medical bay, and a dedicated elevator requiring retinal scans. Hunter stood by the massive windows, holding little Leo. The morning sun was rising over the New York City skyline, casting a golden glow over the sleeping infant. He had just finished a full feeding and was nestled heavily against Hunter's chest, swaddled in a cashmere blanket. Hunter felt a profound, overwhelming love for this child. He had filled the gaping, bleeding hole in his heart left by his own son. The view is better here, a deep voice rumbled behind him. Hunter turned. Lorenzo was standing in the doorway of the living room. The exhaustion of the past 24 hours was etched deeply into the lines around his eyes, and his jaw was covered in dark stubble. He poured himself a measure of scotch from a crystal decanter, despite the early hour. It's beautiful, Hunter agreed softly. Is he safe here, Lorenzo? He is untouchable here. Lorenzo replied, walking over to join him at the window. He looked down at his son, gently trailing a thick finger over the baby's plump cheek. Silas analyzed the formula you threw. It was laced with ricin and a synthetic cardiac depressant. It was designed to mimic sudden infant death syndrome. Eventually, Camilla wanted the heir gone. But why? Hunter asked, his brow furrowing. He's her nephew. He's her sister's blood. Money and power, Hunter. It's the only language the 5 families speak. Lorenzo said bitterly, taking a sip of the amber liquid. When Sophia died, her family's syndicate, the Romanos, was supposed to merge fully with mine under Leo's name. If Leo dies, the Romano assets revert entirely to Camilla. Furthermore, I believe she wants to force a marriage between us to consolidate power. She thinks if I am grieving and vulnerable, I will turn to him. Hunter felt a sharp stab of an unfamiliar emotion in his chest. Jealousy. The thought of that perfectly manicured, venomous woman touching Lorenzo made Hunter's blood run hot. He instinctively pulled Leo a fraction closer. Lorenzo noticed the protective gesture. A faint, genuine smile touched his lips. You don't have to worry about Camilla. She will never set foot near you or my son again. But I cannot simply execute him. If I kill the head of the Romano family without ironclad proof presented to the commission, it will start a mafia war that will burn New York to the ground. I need him to confess. I need to draw him out. How? By letting him think he won. Over the next 3 days, the penthouse became an isolated sanctuary. Lorenzo rarely left, running his massive criminal empire from a bank of encrypted servers in the den. For Hunter, it was a strange, suspended reality. He was a captive, yet he had never felt safer or more cherished. Lorenzo treated him not as an employee but as an equal. He ordered the finest clothes delivered from Bergdorf Goodman for him, soft silk loungewear, tailored shirts, cashmere sweaters. He ate dinner with Hunter every night, asking about his life before the trauma, listening intently to his stories about his childhood in upstate New York. The physical proximity was intoxicating. Whenever Hunter fed Leo in the evenings, Lorenzo would sit close by. He watched Hunter with a hungry, reverent intensity that made Hunter's skin flush and his breath catch. The boundaries between Mafia Don and wet nurse, between protector and protected, were blurring into something deep, powerful, and deeply romantic. On the third night, Lorenzo's alpha instincts began to surface in a way he couldn't control. He had been in close proximity to Hunter for days, breathing in the Omega's calming, milk-sweet scent. His rut was approaching, he could feel the familiar heat building in his veins, the possessive, territorial urges growing stronger. Hunter, Lorenzo growled one evening, his voice rough with barely contained desire. He was standing by the window, his back to the Omega. You need to leave the room. Why? Hunter asked, confused. He was holding Leo, who had just finished feeding and was drifting off to sleep. Because I'm about to lose control, Lorenzo admitted, his fists clenching at his sides. Your scent, it's driving me insane. I can't think straight. I want to claim you. Mark you. Make you mine in a way that can never be undone. Hunter's heart raced. He had heard stories about alpha ruts, but he had never witnessed one firsthand. His ex-boyfriend had been a brutal alpha, but he'd never triggered anything like this in Hunter. Lorenzo, however, Lorenzo made his Omega instincts sing. What do you need? Hunter asked softly, stepping closer. I need you to leave, Lorenzo repeated, his voice strained. Before I do something I can't take back. But Hunter didn't leave. Instead, he laid the sleeping baby in his crib and walked toward the alpha. Lorenzo, he said gently, look at me. Lorenzo turned, and Hunter's breath caught. The alpha's eyes were dark, nearly black, his pupils blown wide. His scent was overwhelming, tobacco, whiskey, and something primal, like a storm about to break. His chest heaved with ragged breaths. You're in rut, Hunter stated. Yes. And you think I'm going to leave you alone like this? You're an unmated Omega in the presence of an alpha in rut, Lorenzo gritted out. Do you understand how dangerous that is? I could hurt you. You won't hurt me, Hunter said with a certainty he didn't fully understand. I trust you. Those 3 words seemed to break something inside Lorenzo. He crossed the room in 2 strides, pulling Hunter into his arms and crushing their mouths together in a desperate, hungry kiss. Hunter gasped against his lips, his hands fisting in Lorenzo's shirt as the alpha's tongue swept into his mouth, tasting him, claiming him. Lorenzo's hands roamed over Hunter's body, his back, his hips, the curve of his waist. He pulled the Omega against him, and Hunter could feel the evidence of his arousal pressing against his thigh. A low, possessive growl rumbled in Lorenzo's chest. "I want to mark you," Lorenzo breathed against his neck, his teeth grazing the sensitive skin where Hunter's scent glands were located. "I want to bite you right here, claim you as mine, and never let you go." Hunter shuddered, his omega instincts keening in approval. "Do it," he whispered. "Mark me. Claim me. I'm yours." Lorenzo needed no further encouragement. He sank his teeth into the juncture of Hunter's neck and shoulder, a sharp, exquisite pain that sent white-hot pleasure flooding through Hunter's veins. Hunter cried out, his body arching against Lorenzo's as the alpha's venom flooded his system, bonding them together on a fundamental, biological level. When Lorenzo finally pulled back, his eyes were clear again, the rut still present, but satisfied for the moment. He looked down at Hunter, who was panting, his neck throbbing with the fresh mark. "You're mine now," Lorenzo said, his voice thick with emotion. "For better or worse, you're mine." Hunter smiled, reaching up to cup the alpha's stubbled jaw. "I've been yours since the night I held your son in my arms." On the fourth night, Lorenzo put his plan into motion. He sat at the dining table, a burner phone in his hand. Hunter sat across from him, bouncing a cooing Leo on his knee. "I am going to make the call," Lorenzo said, his eyes meeting Hunter's. "Are you ready?" Hunter nodded, his jaw set. "Do it." Lorenzo dialed Camilla's private number. He put the phone on speaker and set it on the table. He took a deep breath, instantly transforming his posture and voice. Gone was the strong, steady protector. In his place was a broken, grieving alpha. "Lorenzo?" Camilla's voice purred through the speaker, dripping with false sympathy. "Darling, I've been trying to reach you for days. Rumors are flying. Is everything all right at the estate?" "Camilla," Lorenzo rasped, forcing his voice to crack. It's Leo." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Oh God. Lorenzo, no. What happened?" He took a turn for the worse. Lorenzo lied smoothly, clutching the edge of the table. The new nurse that made, he was incompetent. He dropped him. He's in the private ICU at New York Presbyterian. They don't think he's going to make it through the night. His heart is failing. Hunter watched, mesmerized, by Lorenzo's terrifying ability to manipulate. "I am so sorry, Lorenzo," Camilla said, and Hunter could practically hear the triumphant smirk in his voice. "I am coming to the hospital right now. You shouldn't be alone." "No," Lorenzo said quickly. "I can't bear the hospital. I left him with the doctors. I'm at the old safe house, the one by the docks in Brooklyn. I just need you, Camilla. You're the only family I have left." "I'll be right there, my love," Camilla whispered. The line clicked dead. Lorenzo's expression instantly turned to stone. He stood up, checking the magazine of his pistol. He took the bait. He's going to the Brooklyn warehouse to comfort the grieving widower. Silas and Dominic are waiting with the recording equipment. When he gloats, we have him. Hunter stood up, holding Leo tight. "Be careful, Lorenzo. Please." Lorenzo crossed the room, stepping into Hunter's personal space. He reached out, cupping the back of his neck with a warm, heavy hand. His thumb gently stroked Hunter's jawline. "I will always come back to you," Lorenzo murmured, his gaze dropping to Hunter's lips. Slowly, deliberately, he leaned down and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to his forehead, then to the crown of Leo's head. "Lock the doors. Do not open them for anyone but me." As the private elevator doors closed behind Lorenzo, Hunter felt a deep chill settle over the penthouse. He walked over to the security monitors, watching the cameras that monitored the street below. 20 minutes passed. Suddenly, Hunter's phone buzzed on the counter. It was an encrypted text from a number he didn't recognize. "Did you really think I was stupid enough to go to Brooklyn, little bird? I tracked Lorenzo's burner phone. I know exactly where you are." Before Hunter could scream, the lights in the penthouse completely cut out. The heavy glass doors of the private elevator began to grind open. In the darkness, the heavy, steel-reinforced doors of the private elevator ground open with a metallic screech that echoed through the pitch-black Tribeca penthouse. Hunter stood frozen in the center of the massive living room. Panoramic views of the New York skyline, usually breathtaking, now only provided faint ambient light from the city below. The penthouse's main power grid had been completely severed. A second later, the emergency backup generators kicked in, bathing the corridors in a low, eerie red LED glow. Hunter clutched little Leo tightly to his chest. The baby, sensing the sudden shift in his protector's heart rate, began to whimper. "Sweet boy," Hunter breathed frantically, pressing his lips to Leo's warm forehead. He covered the baby's small ear with his hand, praying he wouldn't cry. From the darkness of the foyer, the distinct rhythmic click-clack of high heels on the imported Brazilian hardwood floor broke the silence. Lorenzo always was too predictable. A woman's voice echoed through the sprawling apartment. The voice was smooth, cultured, and dripping with venom. It was Camilla Romano. "He thinks like a blunt instrument. A hammer. But I think like a scalpel. Did he honestly believe I wouldn't recognize a trap? I paid a rogue ex-Mossad contractor $3 million to plant Pegasus spyware on his private servers last month. I haven't just been tracking his burner phone, little Omega. I've been watching you through the security cameras for 3 days." Hunter's blood ran cold. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Camilla had watched him bond with Leo. She had watched Lorenzo kiss his forehead. This wasn't just about mafia politics anymore. It was deeply, violently personal. Hunter knew he couldn't outrun Camilla's men in the open, and he certainly couldn't fight armed mafia hitmen with a baby in his arms. He needed a weapon, and he needed a stronghold. He turned and sprinted silently on his bare feet down the long, red-lit corridor toward the medical bay. It was the most fortified room in the penthouse, aside from the panic room, which Hunter didn't have the biometric clearance to open. "Where are you hiding, little milkmaid?" Camilla taunted, his voice drifting closer. The heavy scent of his Tom Ford Black Orchid perfume began to snake through the stale air of the penthouse. "You can't protect him. He was a mistake. A premature, weak little complication that stands between me and a $2 billion empire." Hunter slipped inside the medical bay and eased the heavy door shut, locking the deadbolt. His hands were shaking violently. He laid the swaddled, fussing baby into the padded medical bassinet. "Stay quiet, my brave boy." "Just for a minute," Hunter whispered, tears welling in his eyes. He frantically searched the stainless steel counters. There were no guns in here. Lorenzo kept his armory in the master suite. But this was a fully equipped trauma room, designed to patch up gunshot wounds off the books. Hunter ripped open a sterilized drawer and pulled out a surgical scalpel. The carbon steel blade glinted menacingly in the red emergency light. He also grabbed a heavy, solid steel portable defibrillator unit. Outside the door, the footsteps stopped. "Do you know how pathetic you are?" Camilla's voice was muffled through the thick wood, but it was right outside. A scrub servant Omega, playing house with the Don of the Rossi Syndicate. "He doesn't love you. He's using you as a biological pacifier for his dying brat. The moment that baby is weaned, you'll be thrown back into the gutter where you belong." Hunter's grip on the scalpel tightened until his knuckles turned white. The psychological warfare was meant to break him. But Camilla severely underestimated the sheer, terrifying power of an Omega's grief and love. Hunter had already lost one child to a violent monster. He would absolutely not lose another. Boom! A suppressed gunshot shattered the lock on the medical bay door. Wood splinters flew across the room. The door was kicked open with brutal force. Camilla stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the red emergency lights. She was dressed in a pristine white trench coat, holding a customized gold-plated Glock 19. Two massive, heavily armed enforcers stood behind him in the hall. Camilla stepped into the room, his cold eyes scanning the shadows until they locked onto the bassinet. She smiled, a terrifying, predatory stretching of his red lips. "There's the little heir." "Get out," Hunter said. He stepped out from the shadows beside the door, placing his body directly between Camilla and the bassinet. He held the scalpel outward in a defensive stance, his eyes burning with a fierce, untamed fury. Camilla laughed softly, genuinely amused. "You brought a tiny knife to a gunfight, Hunter. How quaint." She raised the Glock, pointing it directly at Hunter's chest. "Kill the Omega," Camilla ordered his men without looking back. "I want to handle the baby myself. A pillow over the face will leave no marks. A tragic crib death." One of the enforcers stepped forward, reaching out a massive hand to grab Hunter by the throat. Hunter didn't flinch. In a fraction of a second, he hurled the heavy steel defibrillator unit directly at the enforcer's knees. The massive weight connected with a sickening crunch. The man roared in pain, his legs buckling, his assault rifle clattering to the floor. Before the second enforcer could react, Hunter lunged forward with terrifying speed, driving the surgical scalpel deep into the wrist of Camilla's gun hand. Camilla shrieked, a piercing sound of absolute agony. The gold-plated Glock dropped from his fingers, clattering across the sterile tiles. Blood bloomed instantly across his pristine white sleeve. "You bastard!" Camilla screamed, stumbling backward and clutching his arm. "Shoot him! Shoot him now!" The second enforcer raised his weapon, leveling the barrel at Hunter's head. Hunter stood his ground in front of Leo's bassinet, bracing himself for the impact, throwing his arms wide to shield the child behind him. He squeezed his eyes shut. "I love you, Leo." But the gunshot that echoed through the room didn't come from the enforcer. It came from the hallway. The enforcer's chest exploded outward in a spray of crimson, and he collapsed dead onto the floor. Hunter gasped, his eyes flying open. Standing at the end of the red-lit corridor, looking like a god of war bathed in blood and shadows, was Lorenzo Rossi. The deafening roar of the gunshot in the enclosed red-lit corridor was absolute. It shattered the tense silence of the medical bay, leaving a high-pitched ringing in Hunter's ears. Time seemed to fracture, slowing down to an agonizing crawl. The massive enforcer who had been a fraction of a second away from pulling the trigger on Hunter did not even have the chance to gasp. His chest exploded outward in a horrific spray of crimson. The kinetic force of the heavy caliber round lifted his body entirely off the imported Brazilian hardwood floor. He collapsed backward, a dead weight, his assault rifle clattering uselessly against the baseboards. Hunter stood frozen in front of the bassinet, his lungs burning, his eyes squeezed shut as he shielded little Leo with his own body. The sharp tang of copper and the sulfurous stench of burned cordite flooded the sterile air of the trauma room. A heavy, terrifying silence followed the blast. Slowly, Hunter opened his eyes. The emergency LED lights cast long, distorted shadows across the hallway. Stepping over the shattered remains of the heavy oak door was Lorenzo Rossi. He was a terrifying vision of unleashed primal violence. He had discarded his tailored suit jacket somewhere between the ground floor and the penthouse. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, the sleeves rolled up to reveal the intricate dark ink of his Sicilian syndicate tattoos. In his massive hands, he held a Benelli M4 tactical shotgun, the barrel still smoking in the dim light. Behind him, moving with the synchronized lethal precision of a highly trained paramilitary unit, were Dominic, Rocco, and half a dozen of the Rossi syndicate's most feared soldiers. They poured out of the emergency stairwell, their weapons drawn, sweeping the perimeter with ruthless efficiency. They hadn't gone to the docks in Brooklyn. It had all been an elaborate, brilliant lie. Did you honestly believe? Lorenzo's voice boomed through the shattered doorway, a terrifying, resonant baritone that seemed to vibrate the very foundation of the high-rise, that I would not know when a rat chewed on the wires of my own house? Camilla Romano, pale as a ghost and clutching his profusely bleeding wrist where Hunter had buried the scalpel, backed away. She hit the edge of a stainless steel medical counter. His pristine white trench coat was now ruined with the blood of his own men. His arrogant, venomous sneer instantly dissolved into sheer, unadulterated terror. Lorenzo, Camilla stammered, his eyes darting frantically between the smoking barrel of his shotgun and the cold, dead eyes of his men. You were at the warehouse. The tracker. Silas found the Pegasus spyware buried in our encrypted servers 4 hours ago. Lorenzo snarled, stepping fully into the room. He did not spare a single glance for the dead enforcer bleeding out on his floor. His dark, frantic eyes immediately sought out Hunter. When Lorenzo saw him standing there, barefoot, trembling, covered in a light dusting of plaster, but aggressively shielding his son's bassinet with a bloody surgical scalpel still gripped in his hand, a profound, staggering look of relief washed over his hardened features. The lethal tension in his jaw relaxed by a fraction of an inch. He lowered the barrel of the Benelli. I traced the IP address of your rogue hacker, Lorenzo continued, finally turning his dead, hollow gaze back to Camilla. Gideon Shore, operating out of a shell company server farm in Hoboken, New Jersey. We paid Mr. Shore a very personal visit an hour ago. He was surprisingly cooperative after Dante broke his first 3 fingers with a ball-peen hammer. He handed over every encrypted file, every offshore wire transfer routed through Credit Suisse, and exactly what you were planning to do here tonight. Camilla's knees visibly buckled. She slid down the side of the medical cabinets, leaving a smear of red against the pristine white enamel. Lorenzo, please. You have to understand. We are family. Sophia's blood flows in my veins. I did this for the syndicate. Do not ever speak my dead wife's name in my presence again. Lorenzo roared, the sound echoing like a physical blow. He closed the distance between them in 2 massive strides, towering over the cowering woman. You poisoned my infant son. You orchestrated a slow, agonizing assassination of a baby. And tonight, you tried to murder the only Omega who managed to save his life. I had to. Camilla shrieked hysterically, the polished veneer of the Mafia princess finally cracking entirely. The Romano family is bankrupt, Lorenzo. My father made terrible investments in the Fulton fish market territories before he died. We owe $40 million to the Sinaloa cartel. They were going to skin me. If Leo inherited the Romano estate, the assets would be locked in a trust for 18 years. I needed the capital liquidated now. I needed the boy out of the way. Hunter listened from the shadows of the bassinet, his stomach turning. It was never about power or some grand mafia vision. It was about greed, pure, pathetic greed and terrible debts. A tiny, innocent baby was suffering organ failure simply because his aunt needed to pay off a cartel. Your debts are your own grave, Camilla, Lorenzo said, his voice dropping to a terrifying, deadly whisper. You are a cancer, and tonight I am cutting you out. You can't touch me. Camilla cried, desperation making his voice shrill. The 5 families will demand a sit-down. You cannot execute a Romano boss without a trial and ironclad proof. The Lucchese and Genovese families will declare open war on the Rossi syndicate if you kill me here. Lorenzo's lip curled into a cruel, triumphant smile. He reached into the pocket of his trousers and pulled out a small, encrypted black audio recorder. He pressed a button. The quiet hum of the medical bay was suddenly filled with the playback of a voice. Kill the Omega. I want to handle the baby myself. A pillow over the face will leave no marks. A tragic crib death. It was Camilla's exact words from 3 minutes ago, recorded in perfect high-fidelity audio. Silas bugged every square inch of this penthouse the moment we moved my son here, Lorenzo said coldly, pocketing the device. The commission will hear this tape tomorrow morning at 10. There will be no war. There will only be a unanimous vote. By noon, your entire faction will be dismantled. Your remaining capos will be absorbed into my syndicate. And you will be erased from history. Lorenzo turned his head slightly, addressing the massive men waiting in the hall. Dominic. Rocco. Yes, boss, the two enforcers answered in unison. Take this trash to the soundproof holding cells in the sub-basement. Have Dr. Eris patch up his wrist. I want him fully conscious, fully aware, and feeling every ounce of his failure when I present him to the commission tomorrow. No! Lorenzo, wait! Please! Camilla screamed, thrashing wildly as Dominic and Rocco hauled him up by his armpits. His expensive designer heels dragged uselessly against the hardwood floor. His desperate, sobbing screams faded into the distance as the heavy emergency stairwell doors slammed shut. Plunging the hallway back into an eerie silence, the siege was over. Lorenzo stood in the center of the room for a long moment, his broad chest heaving as the adrenaline slowly began to recede. He unchambered the shotgun, flicked the safety on, and laid the heavy weapon down on a stainless steel medical tray. Then he turned to Hunter. The terrifying, untouchable dawn of the Rossi Empire vanished. In his place was just an alpha, a father who had come inches away from losing his entire world for the second time. Hunter was trembling uncontrollably now. Shock was setting in, his knees feeling like water. The bloody scalpel slipped from his numb fingers, clattering loudly against the tiled floor. In 3 long strides, Lorenzo crossed the room. He didn't speak. He simply reached out and pulled Hunter into a crushing, desperate embrace. He buried his face in the crook of Hunter's neck, breathing in the scent of him, a mix of milk, fear, and sheer survival. His massive, calloused hands spanned Hunter's back, holding him so tightly it was as if he were the only thing tethering the Alpha to the earth. I've got you, Lorenzo whispered hoarsely, the words vibrating against Hunter's skin. It's over, mia cara. You're safe. My son is safe. Hunter collapsed against his solid chest, his hands fisting in the fabric of Lorenzo's shirt as the tears finally broke free. He was going to kill him, Lorenzo. He was going to murder him right in front of me. But he didn't, Lorenzo said fiercely. He pulled back just enough to frame Hunter's tear-streaked face with his large hands. His thumbs gently wiped away the plaster dust and tears from his cheeks. His dark eyes were filled with an emotion so deep, so raw and unprotected, it made Hunter's breath catch in his throat. Because you fought for him. You fought for us, Hunter. You brought light back into a dead house. Lorenzo leaned down. He didn't ask for permission, and Hunter didn't want him to. He pressed his lips to Hunter's in a kiss that was possessive, deeply passionate, and filled with a burning, undeniable devotion. It was a claim. Hunter melted into the heat of it, wrapping his arms around Lorenzo's thick neck, anchoring himself to the powerful Alpha King who had sworn to protect him from the darkness of the world. The kiss tasted of salt and absolute salvation. A sudden, demanding wail broke the silence. They parted slowly, both of them breathless, resting their foreheads together. A soft, genuine smile broke through the heavy tension on Lorenzo's face. Hunter turned and reached into the bassinet, lifting the crying, kicking baby into his arms. Leo was rooting blindly against Hunter's chest, hungry, angry at the noise, and entirely oblivious to the fact that an empire had just been dismantled and saved in his name. "Someone," Hunter whispered, wiping a lingering tear from his eye as he cradled the boy, "is very aggressively demanding his late-night feeding." Lorenzo stepped up behind him, wrapping a heavy, protective arm around Hunter's waist, pulling both him and his son back against his chest. He looked out into the hallway, where his remaining soldiers stood at attention, waiting for orders. "Salvatore," Lorenzo called out to his lieutenant. "Get a cleanup crew up here immediately. And inform the men." Lorenzo's voice hardened, projecting absolute authority. "From this night forward, Hunter is not staff. He is family. His word is my word. His safety is my life. If anyone disrespects him, they answer to me. Am I understood?" "Yes, Don Lorenzo," the men echoed, bowing their heads respectfully toward Hunter. Lorenzo looked down at the beautiful, brave Omega holding his son, pressing a soft kiss to his temple. "Let us go feed our boy," he murmured. The word "our" hung beautifully and permanently in the air between them. "Tomorrow, the Rossi Syndicate steps into a new era. And I will show the world exactly who my consort is." Hunter Higgins started as a broken, grieving Omega hiding from a cruel world. Through an extraordinary act of maternal love, he became the fierce protector of a Mafia heir and the undeniable consort of the Rossi Empire. Lorenzo and Hunter's journey proved that sometimes the most impenetrable fortresses are breached not by bullets, but by compassion. And the deepest wounds are healed by unexpected love. Little Leo grew up strong, healthy, and fiercely protected by the Omega father who chose him in the dark. Hunter found a home. Lorenzo found peace. And together, they built a legacy that would last for generations, not through bloodshed, but through the unbreakable bond between an Alpha and the Omega who saved his world. Extra story. The penthouse had become a fortress of warmth. 3 months had passed since Camilla Romano's faction was dismantled, 3 months since Lorenzo had marked Hunter in the desperate haze of his rut, 3 months since little Leo had begun to thrive under the Omega's devoted care. The Tribeca penthouse no longer felt like a sterile safe house. It smelled like home, like milk and honey and the dark, smoky undertone of Lorenzo's alpha scent that now permanently clung to every surface. Hunter stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the late autumn sun sink behind the Manhattan skyline. Leo was nestled against his chest, freshly fed and fast asleep, his tiny fingers curled around a lock of Hunter's hair. The baby had grown so much, chubby cheeks, steady weight gain, eyes that sparkled with curiosity whenever he gazed up at his Omega father. "You're brooding." Lorenzo's voice came from behind him, warm and low, followed by the familiar press of a solid chest against his back. Strong arms wrapped around Hunter's waist, pulling him close. Lorenzo pressed his nose into the crook of Hunter's neck, inhaling deeply. "I don't brood," Hunter murmured, leaning back into the embrace. "I contemplate." "You contemplate with the same expression my capos wear when they're about to order a hit." Lorenzo's lips brushed against the healing bite mark on Hunter's neck, the permanent claim that had sealed them together. "What's wrong?" Hunter hesitated. He had felt it building for days, a subtle shift in his body, a warmth that lingered beneath his skin, an ache that wasn't quite pain. His Omega instincts had been growing louder, more demanding. He knew what it meant. He just wasn't sure how to tell Lorenzo. "I think." Hunter started, then stopped. He turned in Lorenzo's arms, careful not to wake Leo. The Alpha's dark eyes searched his face with an intensity that made Hunter's breath catch. "I think my heat is coming." Lorenzo went very still. For a long moment, the only sound was the distant hum of traffic 40 floors below and Leo's soft, rhythmic breathing. Then Lorenzo's hands tightened on Hunter's waist, his alpha scent flaring, tobacco and whiskey and something primal, territorial. "How soon?" Lorenzo asked, his voice rougher than before. "A few days. Maybe less." Hunter swallowed. "I've never had a heat with a bonded alpha before. My ex," he stopped, not wanting to bring that ghost into their home. "It was different. He was never around when it happened. I went through them alone." Something dark flickered across Lorenzo's face. Rage, quickly suppressed. His ex-boyfriend's name had been banned from the penthouse after Lorenzo had Dante deliver the man a permanent reminder of his place in the world. But Hunter knew Lorenzo still thought about it, the abuse, the stares, the baby they had both lost. "You won't be alone this time," Lorenzo said, his voice a low growl. He cupped Hunter's face with both hands, tilting it up until their eyes met. "You will never be alone again. Do you understand me?" Hunter nodded, warmth blooming in his chest. "I know." The heat came 3 days later. Hunter woke in the early hours of the morning, his body burning. Sweat slicked his skin, his omega scent flooding the bedroom with an intensity that made his head spin. His heart pounded. Every nerve ending felt raw, hypersensitive, desperate. Lorenzo was already awake beside him. The alpha had been on edge for days, his rut instincts primed by Hunter's approaching heat. He reached out, pulling Hunter against his chest, and Hunter whimpered at the contact, the solid warmth of the alpha's body, the way his scent wrapped around him like a blanket. "I've got you," Lorenzo murmured against his ear. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Hunter clung to him, trembling. His body was on fire. The need, the ache, the desperate craving for his alpha's touch, it was overwhelming, almost unbearable. He had forgotten how intense this could be. Or maybe it had never been like this before. Maybe the bond had changed everything. "Please," Hunter gasped, fisting his hands in Lorenzo's shirt. "Please, I know what you need." Lorenzo rolled them over, caging Hunter beneath him. His dark eyes were blown wide, his alpha instincts fully engaged. But beneath the primal hunger, there was tenderness. Care. The kind of devotion that Hunter had never experienced before. "Tell me what you need, Omega. Tell me, and it's yours." "You," Hunter whispered, pulling him down. "Just you. Only you. Always you." The heat lasted 5 days. Lorenzo barely left the bedroom. He brought Hunter water, food, whatever the Omega needed between the waves of burning need. He held him through the worst of it, let Hunter cling to him, bite him, mark him in return. When Hunter was too exhausted to move, Lorenzo bathed him with cool cloths, fed him spoonfuls of broth, wrapped him in silk sheets and held him until the next surge of heat took over again. And through it all, Leo was cared for by a team of trusted beta nurses, hand-selected by Lorenzo himself. Hunter hated being separated from the baby, but Lorenzo was relentless in his care. "He's safe," Lorenzo would remind him, pressing kisses to his sweat-slicked forehead. "He's happy. He's fed. He's waiting for you. But right now, your body needs rest. Let me take care of you." And Hunter let him. For the first time in his life, he let someone else carry the weight. On the 5th day, the heat finally broke. Hunter lay curled against Lorenzo's chest, exhausted but peaceful. Every muscle in his body ached, but it was a good ache, the kind that came from being thoroughly loved, thoroughly claimed. The bond mark on his neck throbbed with a warm, steady pulse, connecting him to Lorenzo on a level that transcended words. Lorenzo's hand traced lazy patterns on his back, soothing and grounding. "How do you feel?" the alpha asked quietly. Hunter smiled against his chest. "Like I've been run over by a truck. A very loving truck." Lorenzo laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that vibrated through his chest and into Hunter's bones. It was one of Hunter's favorite sounds. Lorenzo didn't laugh often, but when he did, it was genuine and warm and utterly disarming. "A loving truck," Lorenzo repeated, amusement lacing his voice. "I'll take that as a compliment." "You should." Hunter tilted his head up to look at him. "You were perfect. You are perfect. I don't think I've ever felt so." He searched for the right word. "Safe." Lorenzo's expression softened. He brushed a stray strand of hair from Hunter's forehead, his touch impossibly gentle for hands that had killed men. "You are safe. You and Leo are everything to me. I would tear the world apart before I let anyone hurt you again." "I know." Hunter leaned up to press a kiss to his jaw. "I know you would. That's why I trust you." Later that evening, Hunter finally emerged from the bedroom. He was wearing one of Lorenzo's silk shirts, too big for him, slipping off one shoulder, and carrying Leo in his arms. The baby was fussing, hungry and impatient after 5 days of bottle feeding. Hunter settled into the velvet rocking chair in the nursery and fed him, watching the familiar bliss spread across the baby's face. Lorenzo appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with a glass of scotch in his hand. His hair was still damp from the shower, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He watched them with an expression that made Hunter's heart ache, so much love, so much gratitude, so much wonder. "What are you looking at?" Hunter asked softly. "You," Lorenzo said simply. "Both of you. My family." The word hit Hunter square in the chest. Family. He hadn't had a family since he was a child. He had been alone for so long, surviving, scraping by, convinced that he didn't deserve happiness. And now, here he was, loved, protected, cherished by an alpha who would do anything for him, and a baby who needed him with every breath. "Leo's going to need siblings," Hunter said suddenly, surprising himself. Lorenzo raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" "He needs someone to grow up with. Someone to protect. Someone to fight with." Hunter smiled, looking down at the baby in his arms. "And I think I'm ready to try again. When the time is right." Lorenzo crossed the room, setting down his scotch and kneeling beside the rocking chair. He took Hunter's free hand and pressed a kiss to his knuckles. "When the time is right," he agreed. "No pressure. No rush. Just, when you're ready." Hunter nodded, tears pricking at his eyes. "Thank you." "For what?" "For waiting. For understanding. For not pushing." Hunter squeezed his hand. "For being everything I never knew I needed." Lorenzo rose, leaning down to press a gentle kiss to Hunter's lips. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with emotion. "You saved my son, Hunter. You saved me. I would wait 1,000 lifetimes for you." Leo gurgled happily, milk dribbling down his chin, utterly oblivious to the weight of the moment. Hunter laughed, wiping the baby's chin with the edge of his sleeve. "He agrees. He thinks you're perfect too. Smart kid." Lorenzo settled on the floor beside the rocking chair, his head resting against Hunter's knee. "What do you think? Should we give him a brother?" Hunter looked at his alpha, this powerful, terrifying, impossibly tender man, and felt his heart swell with love. "A sister," he corrected softly. "I want to give him a sister." Lorenzo smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his whole face. A sister it is. The sun had fully set over Manhattan, casting the penthouse in soft, golden lamplight. Hunter sat in the velvet chair, his alpha at his feet, his son in his arms, and felt, for the first time in his life, that everything was exactly where it belonged. He had come to this house as a broken omega, running from his past, carrying grief like a weight around his neck. He had never expected to find love. He had never expected to heal. He had never expected to build a family from the ashes of his own tragedy. But here he was. Here they were. And it was only the beginning. The end.